Hello everybody, welcome to Success Defined. I'm Ben McDonald, and today we're joined by somebody that went into multiple large organizations, learned as an employee, and then made the leap to become an employer, to become an entrepreneur and a business owner. Chris Hervochon, owner of SOAR, A Better Way CPA. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I want to work backwards, right? So you as a financial director left a strong position to then start your own business. What made you take that leap of becoming a business owner?
It's a really good question. So I had a moment a little over a year ago where I was having a one-to-one with my boss. We did that every week. And at some point during the conversation, it was just kind of like, I need to be doing something else.
Okay.
And I texted my wife and I said, I need to do something else, basically. And so that idea kind of festered and marinated for like 6 months. Went to a conference in Las Vegas with a bunch of young CPAs and a lot of folks my age who had gone out and opened firms on their own or who had bought firms and stuff like that. And I started picking their brain, just got a lot of perspective. And so the short version of the story that I like to tell folks because it's more entertaining is that I was at the craps table and I texted my wife and I said, I'm quitting my job and I'm going to go do this. The actual story is a little bit more, is a little bit longer and a little bit more PC, but that's the gist of it.
Yeah.
And so I came home from that conference and the next day I quit my job.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Now, you did not quit your job and go into something that was brand new.
I did not.
So let's explain that a little bit, and I've got a couple questions for you.
Yeah, so I had this side hustle for about 7 years at that point, and it was something that slowly grew. Very tax heavy, tax and accounting, but very tax heavy.
Okay.
And last year, right around this time, it had grown to the point. It just grew every year, and it had grown to the point where it's like this either needs to grow or go away.
Okay.
And so that kind of played into this too. And so I basically just made that decision, like, look, I've already got this thing. Why not see what we can do with it and do it full time?
Yeah, a couple things in your life came to a head. You had that conversation and that realization with your supervisor, boss, and you went to this event, and that reaffirmed what you had thought 6 months prior.
Yeah.
And you've got this side hustle that's becoming something real.
Yeah.
So it's like everything hit at the same time.
And yeah, exactly right. Just talking to those folks at that conference, and some of them are good friends of mine. They just kind of shared what their experience has been, and all of them have been successful. All of them.
Yeah.
Right. And I've got a business coach who says the same thing. Like, look, CPAs rarely go out of business. It's a skill set that's very much in demand. And if you think about going out into the future, if you can kind of iterate yourself along with what the market's going to demand, like you're probably going to be pretty successful. But
right.
You just have to be intentional about it and rip the Band-Aid off.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So let's talk side hustle for a little bit.
Yeah.
You did something on the side for 7 years. That's a long commitment
Yeah.
without going one way or another. So why did you even want to start a side hustle? What gave you that desire to start something?
When I first started, I would say it was probably just a need to explore.
Okay.
Accounting is very, very broad. And at that point, I was doing forensic accounting, and I started this business right at the tail end of my tenure in forensic accounting, and then right into the time when I went to JPMorgan Chase to go do corporate.
Okay.
And so I knew I wanted to do corporate. I knew that there was a need for small businesses where I was living at the time. And I had some tax experience doing taxes for friends and family and stuff like that. So I just figured, maybe I can just explore this a little bit more and start a business. It was a side hustle, very, very small. And then, maybe if it grows to the point where I can go out on my own, maybe I'll do that. At that particular point, I was very, very naive in what it actually took to grow a business to that point where at that point I would have felt comfortable just going out and just, young family and stuff like that. So it basically just kind of marinated for 7 years and went through different iterations and kind of grew through word of mouth, zero marketing, zero. And, got to the point where it had grown by word of mouth enough where I felt like I had a big enough base where if I just took it and grew it a little bit and focused on growing it, then you do it full time. So that's what I did.
Perfect. Yeah, I like it. So let's keep working backwards. Because you were a senior accountant at JPMorgan Chase, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
There's a couple positions in between there though.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, but either way, so you worked for a major organization.
Huge.
Right. So we're talking one of the biggest organizations in the world.
Yep.
Being an employee at such a big corporation compared to now being a small business owner, what were one or two of those lessons you were able to take away from being an employee at one of those big companies to now being a business owner?
So a couple of things. I would say the things that are driving me today are the things that I learned there specifically, or the things that I came to realize when I was there.
Okay.
So I'll give you two, as you asked for two.
Perfect.
So my direct manager at that time, I was at the point in my career where I was thinking about automation and thinking about how we can do things differently, more efficiently. Because to be frank, I didn't really like data entry and I didn't like some of the more mundane stuff. You know, I wanted to be more efficient.
Yeah.
And so she used to tell me, well, Chris, we want you to think outside of the box, but we want you still touching the box.
That's a good way to describe it.
Direct quote. And, at that point it was kind of interesting, but, everybody's definition of what is touching the box and what the actual box is different. And so, I don't know, that's always kind of not bothered me a little bit, but it's always something I've just kind of kept in the back of my mind. Like, why do we need to be inside the box all the time? Why do we need to be touching the box all the time? Why can't we go push the limits and see where we can get to? And then the other interesting, call it experience or takeaway that I took from that was her manager. She had a nice corner cube because at JPMorgan, if you where I worked in Wilmington, Delaware, if you're gonna have an office, you're pretty high up the chain, right? Yeah, if you had a corner cube, you were doing something. So she had this nice corner cube and she had this big whiteboard, and you've probably seen the image, but on her whiteboard, and I had never seen it at this point. Bottom left corner, it said there's a box. It said your comfort zone on the inside, and then on the top right corner, there's a little dot, and it said where the magic happens. And so I'd never seen that graphic. It's apparently pretty popular, but it always kind of stuck in the back of my mind. Like, if you're going to be in your comfort zone all the time, you're just going to get what the folks around you, from an employee's perspective, allow you to have. You're never going to make your own way. You're never going to determine how successful you're going to be, well, to an extent. And so, I've never gotten that image out of my mind. And so I try to make sure that I'm not in my comfort zone very much.
Yeah, it's amazing how things like that stick with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it has obviously a major impact. It stayed that long with you, and still today is one of those driving forces.
Exactly right.
So let's start to pivot towards your actual business, right?
Mm-hmm.
But before we actually get into the nuts and bolts of what you do, and one or two arbitrary numbers, right, obviously, but what are one or two of those misperceptions you had going into business, right? Because you had a side hustle for 7 years, you have a pretty good idea of what that side hustle looks, but now when this is your full-time income, your full-time job, what are some of those misperceptions? You thought it was going to be a certain way and it was a different way, or you didn't think something was going to be a major priority, but it became that, and anything in that realm?
Yeah, the first thing I would say is that you have to have a perfect product or service when you're first starting.
Okay.
Because you don't.
Right.
You have to have a minimally viable product or service that you can deliver to a customer confidently, that you can do well. But it doesn't have to be perfect. The back end doesn't have to be perfect. The client, the stuff that doesn't face the client doesn't have to be perfect. Like, you just need to be able to deliver a good product, or a good service.
Yep.
Right. So it's like the Facebook saying, done is better than good.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Right.
Just be able to deliver something and deliver it well.
Do you think that, and we'll get back to this, but do you think that's why you had that side hustle for 7 years instead of making a leap of actually making it a full-time thing? Was that pursuit of perfection something in your mind?
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. Especially with kind of my mindset, just being really, really efficient, being able to automate different things. If it wasn't going to rise to those standards, and it just Yeah, exactly right.
Okay.
It's harder to pull the trigger
Got
if
it.
what's in your mind is not perfect, and so you think if it's not perfect to me, then it's not going to be good enough to a customer.
Got it. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
So sorry, I interrupted.
No, that's good.
But keep going. So any other misperceptions of going into a full time?
Yeah, so I think the second thing is marketing.
Okay.
So,
What do you
so I'm an accountant, right?
Right.
Not a marketer. Just to having maybe the misperception of where the business is actually going to come from when you first start.
Okay.
It's mostly been word of mouth.
Yep.
You know, I think it's easy to get an idea in your head like, oh, I can just go run a bunch of Facebook ads and like clients are just going to come pouring in. Tomorrow I'll be rich, you know,
Yeah,
that sort of thing. No, it doesn't work that way. You know, the easiest and the best way to actually build business is to actually go do the work and sit down with people and talk to them. I joined a B&I group. A lot of my businesses come from B&I. And the way that business comes from B&I is you just kind of you show up every week.
Okay.
You're consistent. You talk to people. You do one-to-ones. When you get up to do your presentation, it's good, it's clear, it's concise. Those sorts of things, right? It's not about just throwing ads up on the internet and AdWords, Facebook, or whatever it is, and just having the business pour in.
Yeah.
It's just not how it works. Not in my business anyway.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, it makes sense. A lot of the people that are listening are in some type of service business, and so a lot of times it's the same thing, right?
Yep.
If you're a CPA, you're a financial planner, anything like that,
Yep.
that relationship is important.
Yep.
And so in your role, that word of mouth, those referrals are because people actually believe in you. They've experienced what you've been able to offer them.
Exactly right.
So,
you got to fill the know, like, and trust buckets.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can't, it's hard to do that when you're not face to face talking to somebody.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so let's jump into SOAR. Talk about exactly what SOAR is, and then we'll keep going kind of down that rabbit hole.
Sure. So SOAR is a CPA firm, sole practitioner CPA firm. I offer a service called a Wayfinder. I offer outsourced accounting and taxes. So everybody knows what taxes are. A Wayfinder is basically, sitting down with a client and doing the due diligence on your business, figuring out exactly where you are and where you want to get to, and then how you're going to get there. So KPI development, looking into your financial processes, looking at the environment that you're operating in, how you're operating, tools and softwares that you use, who your clients are, all that stuff, right? That's what we look at. So that's like step one, ideally. And then outsourced accounting is basically the implementation of all of that.
Okay.
So taking on the bookkeeping and the accounting, automating it as much as possible so we get good, clean data to work with, and then delivering value on the back end by meeting with the clients, telling the story of what's going on in their business, what levers they can pull in their business to move their business forward. So it's all about getting from the business that you have, the business that you want. And that's kind of what that outsourced accounting is about. It's not just doing the bookkeeping, it's providing that value, that strategic advice that I think sometimes is missing in more traditional service offerings.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So with those processes, those offerings, what problems are you solving for business owners and for businesses?
Good question. So I talk about the 4 pillars of business strategy. Okay. Customer acquisition and sales, financial strategy, people and culture, and then risk management. Now, that's in order, right? That's in the order that I prioritize them. I think the last 2 those are debatable, right? And they generally work their way through the maturity cycle of a business. But a lot of my customers, they fall into that first 2.
Okay.
Those first 2 pillars.
Yep.
It's either customer acquisition or it's financial strategy. Now, why does it go that way? Well, if you don't have clients and you don't have revenue, then you don't have a business. Right. And if you don't have enough revenue, then your business you're just not gonna be able to support yourself, literally support yourself.
Yep.
So develop KPIs around that, if that's the problem.
Yep.
If you've got enough revenue, if you've got enough clients, stuff like that, then we can kind of move into financial strategy. So cash flow, is the revenue great, but the cash flow is not so great? Well, then there's levers that we can pull to fix that.
Yep.
Right? Pricing, stuff like that.
Yeah.
All things, and then, once those problems have been solved, we can get into people and culture. Do you have enough people? Do you have the right people? Is your culture good? Do you have problems in recruiting, things like that, and then risk management, which is kind of the tail end that comes after those things. But those are the problems that we're trying to solve. The way that we solve that is by getting good data and tracking it and having conversations and knowing that we're working in the correct financial framework.
Gotcha. Yep, makes sense. And what's setting SOAR apart from the other CPA firms down the road from you?
All of those things that I just listed. Most CPA firms, they're doing the traditional bookkeeping, which is just data entry. A lot of what I hear from clients is, well, my CPA is not proactive enough. I don't know what I'm paying for. I actually just had that one. A new client came in. Yeah, my CPA's been doing my accounting, but I don't know what he's doing. So it's like, it's those sort of things. Just being more proactive, getting in front of clients on a more regular basis. Yep. The automation is something that I'm very heavily focused on, just because I think it takes the focus away from the things that are not value add, puts it more toward the things that are value add, the insight that you get from the data. Yeah. Data driven, everything is data now. There's more data today than there was yesterday, and it's going to be that way, for as long as we're alive. And so what are we doing with that data? Yeah. What are we doing? How are we using it to inform decisions that we're making in our business?
That's the thing, right? So there's more data than ever before, but it's the implementation of it. Like, how do you actually take that data and apply it to your business?
Exactly right.
There's a major disconnect there.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and you're connecting those gaps between the data and letting these business owners use it.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's tons of data. A lot of business owners don't even know what data they have, or how to get to the data, or what they can do with it. So that kind of goes back to the business strategy, the 4 pillars of business strategy, and the KPI development. And that's part of the reason why in the Wayfinder I ask, well, what pieces of software are you using in your business? Because if I know what software that you're using in your business, I know what data that you're generating, whether you know it or not. Yep. And then we can kind of think about warehousing it. So if the data is available and it's warehoused, we can get to it. And then if we know where you need to be focusing as far as strategy, we know what kind of KPIs we need and whether or not that data is going to support those KPIs.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense.
And then from there, it's just visualization.
Yeah. So you're still early into this being a full-time thing, right? You've done it for 8 years, but you're 8 or 9 months into this being your full-time go.
Right.
So what's the vision that you have for the business? Where are you trying to take SOAR?
Right. So, I want to be developing my outsourced accounting practice. I want to be helping business owners to create that time, money, and freedom from their business by putting these processes in place and working through that with them. So always iterating, always building a better mousetrap. The profession is changing a lot, and so being ahead of that change and realizing where that change is going to come from. A lot of people don't realize 75% of the firm owners who are practicing today are going to retire inside of 10 years. And so there's going to be a lot of opportunity in the space there, just from that vacuum that's going to happen. Yeah. And not to mention from the technology. We've got, we're talking about blockchain, we're talking about AI, we're talking about machine learning, we're talking about data. All that stuff is going to play into that. And so there's going to be more clients because there's going to be, hopefully more small businesses that are not being serviced by existing CPAs. And
or even if they are, most of these, like you said, most of these existing CPAs aren't doing the in-depth stuff that they should be doing anyways.
Right, exactly right. And we're seeing it's the same thing on the tax side. Or actually, I'll talk about the bookkeeping side for a minute. QuickBooks Live just came out. QuickBooks just came out with a new product. So for $200, you get QuickBooks Advanced, and you have a person who's a bookkeeper for you, right? Well, that's all well and good, and it's cheap, and cheap is good, but it's got to be very, very standardized. So is it right for your business? Don't know. Same thing's happening on the tax side. So we see TurboTax for free.
Right.
So great, you can go file your tax return online, but what happens when you have a question? What happens when you need to go back and get your tax return 2 years later because you're going to get a mortgage? Right. Well, I just had a client came to me 2 weeks ago. This happened to her. I said, she said, I had a good experience with you. A couple years ago, I tried TurboTax for free last year. It didn't work out. And I said, okay, well, I didn't file your tax return last year. Can you give me a copy? Sure. Goes back to TurboTax. Well, they want me to pay whatever it is. It was prohibitively expensive for her.
Yeah, okay.
She comes back and she's like, they're holding my tax return hostage. It's like, well, that's what happens. You have now become the product. So it's happening in bookkeeping. It's happening in tax. It's happening on social media. You're the product, right? And so I think we're going to see a shift back the other way, where because humans are inherently social beings, and not everybody fits in this one bucket, in this one box. And it's the same way for everybody's business. It's the same way for everybody's taxes. And so being aware that that change is going to come and that shift is going to come, and kind of staying ahead of it, layering on the technology piece, understanding where the market's going to be, I think that's kind of how I see my business fitting in. Does that make sense?
It does. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love it. And you've got, that was a clear vision. Like, where you think the industry's going, what's going to be important, and how you're going to play a role in it. So
Absolutely.
I love it.
Absolutely.
Not a lot of the small business owners, especially people that are on the smaller side of, or on the earlier side of having it be their full-time thing, have that type of clear vision and idea of how they can play a role.
I appreciate that.
So I like that a lot. So let's get more on the philosophical side a little bit. So we talked about the vision of the business, where you think that's going. What's your vision? Where do you want to be? What role do you want to be playing in the world? Things like that.
Do I want to be playing in the world?
Yeah.
Hopefully just making small businesses better and more profitable for their owners and for their stakeholders, from a business perspective.
Yep.
Right? I want to be advancing these ideas that I have about the profession, because I think it's important. I think the CPA profession is important. I think it plays an important role in society, because we're trusted advisors, right? And so we're held to these very high ethical standards, and we're advising folks on stuff that's really, really personal and really, really important. And I think I can do that by sharing these ideas on where I see the profession going, and volunteering inside the profession and things like that. Another one I would like to help facilitate change is education, both inside the profession and outside the profession. That's one of my bucket list items.
All right.
Realizing that education is not a piece of paper, or which is the degree or diploma or whatever it is. It's about what you've learned and what you can apply. And sometimes those things don't necessarily coincide. And certainly, the latter is a lot cheaper than the former in a lot of cases. You think about the accounting knowledge base. You could go get that for $100.
Right.
Using various online courses and sources and stuff like that. It doesn't necessarily need to cost you $150,000. But just kind of furthering that conversation about education, furthering those ideas inside of the profession. And those two, they go together. So that's kind of more broadly my vision.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I like it. So what are one or two of those pain points that you're experiencing in your business right now?
Well, it's convenient that you're asking me that during tax season.
Well, yeah. That's true.
When and how to hire. When's it appropriate to hire?
Okay.
When should you be thinking about hiring? Pricing is always going to be, for a service-based business, pricing is always going to be one of those things, those pain points.
Yep.
And nobody's got a silver bullet for that,
Right.
I don't think. Those are probably the two biggest things.
Yeah.
I am going through a growth phase, and it is the busiest time of the year. So just trying to figure out how do I want to grow, what do I want that to look like, how big do I want it to get from an employee perspective, what can the business support, things like that.
Right.
And I work from home too, so that all kind of plays in together.
Yeah.
So I'm having this conversation. Well, do I get an office? If I get an office, do I hire locally? I don't know. Our talent pool is not as big as it would be in somewhere like Atlanta or,
Right.
or a bigger city like Charlotte, where where you're from.
Yeah.
But then again, if you keep it as a home-based business and you have remote work, you can pull the best talent from anywhere in the country.
Right.
So that's a conversation that I'm.
Well, and Hilton Head's a pretty good destination.
Exactly.
Right? So this whole area, Savannah, Hilton Head, that whole, people are okay to come here.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's growing, right? So those are kind of the things that I'm thinking about, how to grow and how to do it the right way, as opposed to it's got to be done now.
Perfect. So how do you balance this vision, what you want to do as an individual, what you want the business to do, worrying about growing? How do you handle all that future stuff, the grand vision type stuff, with your day-to-day responsibilities? How do you balance that?
It's got to be really, really intentional.
Okay. What does that look like for you? Let's get tactical here a little bit.
Okay. So for instance, on my calendar, every single day, there's an hour blocked off for learning time.
Okay.
So go learn something.
Right.
Whatever it's going to be. Sometimes that's reading a book that I'm kind of working through. That's related to my business somehow. Sometimes it's listening to a podcast. Sometimes it's listening to an ebook or an audible book. Stuff like that. Blocking off that time.
Yeah.
Blocking off the time and the money to go to conferences. So that does a couple of things. Generally, it exposes you to the most advanced ideas that are happening in the profession. I think that's especially true in accounting. 2, it re-energizes you about what you are doing.
Yep.
And 3, it exposes you to the people who are there and also thinking about the things that you're thinking about or maybe not. And you can always bounce ideas off them. Like for instance, I'm sitting here talking to you because this is my full-time job now. It's my full-time job because of a conference that I went to a year ago.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important. It's just, it's just a matter of being really intentional, having a clear learning plan for yourself. Mm-hmm. If you're a solopreneur like me, what are you going to do to iterate your product and your service and make it better for your clients? But it's just about being really intentional.
Yeah, no, that's a good answer. So if you're passing a couple lessons on, somebody's an employee, they're trying to make the leap from a side hustle into a full-time thing, what's 1 or 2 of those lessons or pieces of advice that you'd want to pass on?
Okay. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got, when I started my side hustle, this is a story, if we have time.
Of course we have time.
Okay, so when I started my side hustle, I had just gotten out of forensic accounting. And I have a bunch of buddies who are family law attorneys.
Okay.
I was at a party. One of my buddies from high school, family law attorney, says, you should really think about doing consulting in family law. It can probably get you a bunch of business. I said, I don't know anything about family law. So what did I do? I went to a conference. I was at a conference 3 weeks before my first child was born. Why my wife let me go, I will never know.
That's
bless her.
gutsy even to ask.
Bless her. She's awesome. So I go to this conference. I'm sitting there. I learn about family law, and I just happened to sit down next to a guy who practiced in that area, and we got to chit-chatting, and kind of told him what I was doing. Yada yada. He goes, "You just have to rip the Band-Aid off. Just go do it." And so rip the Band-Aid off has kind of become a mantra in our house.
Okay.
And it festered for a long time, and it's actually still festering because I'm talking about it, right? But rip the Band-Aid off. That's one. I think number 2 is that realize that having that side hustle is a value add for you because you're learning how to run your business before you actually have that risk of, hey, how am I going to pay my mortgage next month?
Right.
So I think there's a lot of value in that. So I think don't discount that for yourself. And then number 3, realize that it's not going to be perfect out of the gate, and that you're going to need to be constantly iterating toward great, whatever that's going to look like.
Okay, so the name of the show is Success Defined. So how do you define success in your life?
Freedom. So being able to do, what I want when I want.
Okay.
And that probably sounds a little bit crass or more crass than I intended.
It's literally the answer that I got with the last podcast that I
That's
did.
awesome.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
That's really good.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason why I'm out on my own, right? Is because if I want to implement a new process or if I want to try something out, I can. I don't have to go ask anybody to do it.
Right.
It's just my time and my time. If I want to be sitting here doing a podcast with you, I can. If I want to go pick up my kid from school early and go to the golf course, I can. I can market to whoever I want. I can work with whoever I want. To me, that's freedom. And then, being able to, kind of the eat what you kill thing, right?
Yep.
So being able to determine how much I make based on how hard I work and who I work with and how I control my pricing and my product and stuff like that, allowing me to have the lifestyle that I want to, outside of my business, and providing that for my family.
That's great. Okay, last 2.
Okay.
What is one thing in the world that if you could change, you would, and then why?
That's a good question. Can I give you two?
Yeah.
I'm gonna give you two.
Sure.
All right. So one.
It's a podcast. There's no.
Yeah, I
right or
can do
wrong
whatever I
answer.
want, right?
That's
Cool. Okay. So I'll give you two. One is one that I already talked about. Is education. So
Yep.
redefining exactly what education is.
Okay.
It's the attainment of knowledge and skills, and you can get that however you get that. And then number two, I would say the silos that we're finding ourselves in. To some extent, I think is really troubling. Social media, like you think about Facebook, you run around the platform and you like stuff, and then before you know it, you're getting stuff that's like that.
Yeah.
And it's all designed to keep you on the platform. And every platform is like that, and every form of media is like that. And so I think what you're finding is that people are getting into their own silos, and then it gets kind of weird when you think about getting out of that silo, if you've been in that silo long enough. So I think as a society, we need to be thinking about that a little bit more intentionally than we are, because the cat's out of the bag, and it's what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
And I think it drives a lot of the problems that we see societally that we're having now.
No, that's a really interesting topic that you hit on that has not been brought up on podcasts before, so I like that a lot.
Yeah, from a marketing perspective, it's great because you can target exactly who you want,
Yeah,
when you want, which is why I said earlier, I just thought you could go out and run a bunch of Facebook ads, and then before you know it, you're rich.
Right.
It doesn't work that way. Yeah, it's just a really interesting problem that we find ourselves in. Like, 20 years ago, when my dad bought our first computer that hooked up to AOL, via dial-up. I mean, who would have thought that you could go on to that you'd have Facebook or something like Facebook?
Yeah.
Really bizarre.
Yeah, it is. Tim Ferriss has an Instagram account that he only follows people or topics that he's learning about, and then when he's done learning about that and moves on to something else, he just gets rid of all of them and follows somebody new.
That's really cool.
Yeah, so
that's a great idea.
Yeah, so it's like creating the silo you want to be in.
Yeah.
So you're getting hit and bombarded with all the stuff you want to be.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. Okay, last one. You and I are having a conversation 3 years from now. What has happened in that 3-year period where you can look back and say that was a successful point in your life?
Successful point in my life? Just getting to the point where the business has grown and it's sustainable. Hopefully providing more opportunity for my family because the business has been sustainable, and that gets to me spending more time out of my business.
Yep.
Or getting, I'm going through the solopreneur phase right now where it's like 24/7.
Yeah.
And so kind of getting out of that, getting off that hamster wheel to the point where I can be a little bit more intentional about how I spend my time as opposed to the next fire,
Yeah.
right? Or building whatever. So that's probably what it looks like. Just, continually increasing that freedom that I talked about. If I've got more freedom 3 years from now than I have right now,
Then you're going in the right direction?
Yeah, then it's a win. Yeah, and it's never going to be perfect. The whole thing is an iteration. The business, for all I know, the business is going to look totally different in 3 years.
Yeah.
It very well could. I don't know. But just having that, just keeping that open mind and keep learning, and like I said, if in 3 years that's where it is, then that's a success in my mind.
Great. Yeah, I like it. So where can listeners and viewers find you? Any final message you want to get across?
Sure, all over the place with the exception of Snapchat.
Okay.
So Chris at betterwaycpa.com. That's the email address, 843-608-0298, phone number. You can call me.
We'll
email
put
me.
that in too.
Yeah, it's perfect. So Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Quora. I post on Quora every single weekday.
Okay.
I found that during tax season, though, it's 5 times a week, not necessarily every weekday.
Got it.
So I'm trying to make good on that promise. But Instagram, I'm on Pinterest too. I've got a marketing agency. They got me on the Pinterest. I didn't even know what Pinterest was. But yeah, you can find me everywhere. Website, betterwaycpa.com.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.